Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Maximizing Your Investment in Robotic Technology, the Value of Expanded Access for Your Surgeons. I am Angie Stewart with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We're looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log in to today's webinar to access the recording. Hospitals today are focusing on achieving the quadruple aim, aligning lower costs, improved outcomes, a better patient experience, and improved provider satisfaction. This webinar will provide key insights from industry experts about how a strategic robotics service line that maximizes Da Vinci technology enables hospitals to achieve those four goals. We're pleased to have two experts with us today from Hackensack Meridian Health System and Intuitive, maker of the Da Vinci surgical system, to talk us through how to maximize your investment in robotic technology and the value of expanded access for your surgeons. Dr. Michael Stifelman is the Chair of Urology and Director of Robotic Surgery at Hackensack University Medical Center, as well as Professor and Founding Chair of Urology for the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine at Seton Hall University. An internationally recognized pioneer and leader in robotic surgery, Dr. Stifelman has performed more than 3,000 robotic procedures to date and has been recognized by Castle Connolly's New York Top Doctors, America's Top Doctors, and Top Doctors for Cancer, as well as in the annual Top Doctors issue of New York Magazine. Next, we have Jim Ossenmacher, Northeast Region Director of Market Access and Custom Analytics at Intuitive. Jim has extensive experience in healthcare, with over 15 years working for hospitals and health systems in business development, strategic planning, and physician alignment. Prior to joining Intuitive, he served as Vice President of Strategy and Business Development for two multi-hospital health systems. He earned a certificate in lean healthcare and is a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives and Healthcare Financial Management Association. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us today to speak about maximizing your investment in robotic technology. My name is Dr. Michael Stifelman, Chair and Professor of Urology here at Hackensack University Medical Center. And as mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, Jim Ossenmacher, Regional Director of Marketing Access of Intuitive. So if there's no further questions, we're going to get started. So a little bit about myself. I've been doing robotic surgery now for over 16 years. We first had the first Da Vinci in 2004. You can see from this picture it was the standard system, 3-arm. I focused initially on robotic partial nephrectomy, publishing the first paper ever on partial nephrectomy in 2005. And, going off script a little bit, for me this has been super exciting because when you look at the data from 2005, 2% of all kidney surgeries were done robotically. If you look at the data today in 2020, 72% of all kidney surgeries in the United States is done robotically. So this is a trend that I'm sure will continue amongst many other service lines as this technology continues to find its place and gets adapted. I first came into the role of Director of Robotics and developing a robotics program in 2009. And you can see from this chart, we were having somewhat of a stagnation period. And then by developing a programmatic approach, a service line approach to robotics, we've been able to grow our program dramatically at NYU. And when I left, we were doing close to 2,000 surgeries on 5 systems a year. Since that time, I've moved to Hackensack University Medical Center. I was recruited here 4 years ago to be the Chair of Urology and the Professor and Chair at the School of Medicine. In 2017, I was appointed the Director of Robotic Surgery for the for the hospital. And then most recently, with the success we've had at our academic flagship, Hackensack University Medical Center, I became the Chair of the Hackensack Meridian Health System Robotic Service Line. And I think I'm hopeful that that experience dating back from 2004 and more recently from 2009 to 2020 as a program director will help you and guide you to building a similarly productive program of your own. At Hackensack, we're 33 Da Vinci surgeons. We have 8 Da Vinci surgical subspecialties listed here, and we have 5 Da Vinci surgical systems, all of which are 4th generation. As you can see, we have an X system, which we utilize in our ambulatory care center. That's been a huge initiative for us, especially to get the less complex cases out of the main OR to give us a runway in the main OR to do the more complex cases. And most recently, we purchased a single port system, and in less than a year, we've done close to 300 single port surgeries. So we do have a lot of experience in that as well, if that's something anyone is interested in learning more about. As a service line for the institution, the Hackensack Meridian Health, we are the largest health system in New Jersey. New Jersey services 12 million patients. Our health system is the largest here in New Jersey. We have 15 Da Vinci robots. We've got 1,000. We have 4 surgeons that have done over 1,000 procedures. 9 of our surgeons have done over 500, 41 over 100, and 22 surgeons over 50. So again, it's about 72 surgeons with a large experience, or certainly a very formidable experience here in robotic surgery. The one thing I would sort of start challenging with now is that just because someone's done a lot of surgery doesn't always make them a true surgeon champion. And one could say, wow, any of your 103 surgeons that have done more than 50 cases could be a surgeon champion. Certainly any of the 40 or so surgeons that have done over 500 cases should be a surgeon champion. But I would challenge you that to be a surgeon champion, it's more than just doing a lot of robotic surgery. It's really about putting the program's needs before your own. That's a hard thing for surgeons to do sometimes, but what I've learned when you have that sort of altruistic approach and you're focused on the satisfaction of your fellow surgeons, that's the sort of magic sauce. That surgeon also has to be able to align to executive strategy. They need to know how to communicate with the executive team, speak the same language, understand the data of their own program and what the data of the hospital is looking for. They need to be able to support the operational team and establish a culture in the OR. They've got to be focused on data and understanding how to collect data and use that data to drive change, as well as really spending time or at least developing committees to help with standardized credentialing and block scheduling. These are and you could take this slide and you could create your job description for your surgeon champion, what we would call the director, your robotics medical director or surgical director. But when you're looking for that person to drive your program, these are some of the key characteristics one should be looking for in a surgeon champion. So I'm going to switch gears here, and I want to talk a little about understanding the organizational and strategic priorities and how this surgeon champion or this director of your program needs to be able to understand the organization that they work in priorities. At any point, if someone has a question, please feel free to do a team chat and or reach out to us directly. So I'm sure many of you heard of this concept of the quadruple aim, especially from an executive leadership standpoint. Sort of the hot buzzword right now, the quadruple aim. It used to be the triple aim, if we remember. Another word for triple aim was value-based medicine. But the quadruple aim added something super important, and the concept of physician satisfaction. And I would argue, as important as your outcomes and your patient care, your organization needs to be focused on physician satisfaction. Your surgeons are not commodities. They're not people you can buy and trade. They're people that you have to not just educate, but you have to support to become their leaders and help drive the goals of your program. I would argue, or not argue, but I would challenge you and suggest to you that robotic-assisted surgery aligns with this quadruple aim perfectly. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, from enhanced patient experience, terms of outcomes, there's no question that any time we can take a surgery and make it minimally invasive, and using robotics, we'll have less pain, faster recovery, reduced conversions to open with robotics. We're able to push a lot of our patients into the outpatient setting, and we're harnessing new technology. In terms of improved patient outcomes, again, we have shown this specifically in our field in urology over and over, not just in prostate surgery, but as I just told you earlier, in kidney surgery and urinary reconstruction, that robotics decreases our length of stay. It decreases the complications. It decreases our surgical site infections, return to the OR, readmission rates, and it consistently provides us excellent outcomes. And that's, I think, certainly from a goal of the administration, these are all things people can understand and relate to. It does, though it may increase costs slightly initially in the operating room itself, when you look at the total care of that patient, and you don't just look at that one episode of care, but the entire care of that problem that patient's coming in with, robotics is shown to reduce clinical variation, which decreases cost. It is pathway friendly, very easy to develop ERAS protocols. It certainly decreases our length of stay and readmissions, and allows us to be part of a larger ecosystem. And then finally, in terms of enhanced provider experience, surgeons like robotics. It helps with their ergonomics as well as their staying power in the field of surgery. It allows the surgeons to work with dedicated teams because most of the teams are focused on robotics, making them more dedicated and more efficient. Because of the cost of robotics, we have spent a tremendous amount of time focusing on OR efficiencies to help reduce the time in the operating room. So again, a huge surgeon satisfier. We have an ability to provide significant amount of analytics around robotics, training, as well as marketing. All of these aspects are what surgeons really gravitate toward robotic programs for. And again, the biggest part of this is clearly going to be the ability to achieve the best patient outcome possible. But secondarily, surgeons want to work in an efficient environment. They want to have access to analytics, to data, to improve training and marketing, and developing a robotics program and which focuses a lot of the effort on the surgeon will allow this to happen. At this point, I'm just going to stop and just see if there are any questions. Okay, I'm going to continue. So let's just talk a little about early observations and challenges. And for those of you that either running a robotics program or part of a robotics program, many of these will be familiar to you, but they're important to remember, and I can guarantee you all of them you can overcome. The reason why robotics programs fail, the reason why robotics programs don't grow, the reason why there's stagnation and there's a lack of unity is really all of the boxes listed below. I would say one of the biggest complaints that I hear and the biggest problems is lack of data. You know, when you have these committees, they come together and it's just one big complaining session. But there's really no data driving and focusing their goals. There's often very little executive alignment and support. Very rarely do we see an executive leader come into a robotics meeting, or do we have the ability as a program director to meet with the executive team. That's a mistake. There's not great organization. The program is basically looked at, oh, here's a piece of equipment we roll around versus a service line. We don't do a great job in communicating, and certainly communicating the challenges that we have. There's competitive pressures on the program. There's block time issues. We see that a lot. You know, surgeons who will have a day in the OR, they'll do one case robotically followed by 3 cases or 2 cases non-robotically. That's not efficient. That's a terrible use of block time. Less and less we see this, but there is a negativity mindset toward robots. There's a lot of haters, especially in the beginning. We need to overcome that. And the lack of the fact that this is a service line. And I think if you address all these issues, which I would say are challenges, but opportunities, one can build an amazing robotics program. And I'll give you some of the wisdom and some of the pearls that we did to overcome these challenges. And again, overcoming the challenges requires a surgeon champion. You need to have someone on your team that's going to take responsibility and ownership to be that liaison, to build that bridge not just to the executive team to make sure everyone's aligned on their goals, but also to make sure we can execute the wishes and the needs of the institution to the rest of the program. And that's where I think developing vertical alignment as well as developing a surgeon champion can help you tremendously. So getting alignment to create structure and culture is not easy, but it's also it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, but it's not complicated. So it's not easy because you got to roll your sleeves up and get it done, but it's not complicated because it's a pretty straightforward playbook. And I say that because I've done this playbook twice already. I did this in one of the largest well-known academic centers in the country, which is NYU, and I've done it now in an academic center here within New Jersey. So when you talk about the initiatives or the keys to success in a service line, again, they're listed here, and they seem, I guess, like a very large hill to climb initially, but if you sort of check it off one by one, it's something that's very, not easy, but certainly able to do, able to achieve. But when you do this, you've got to build trust. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail. You've got to have data. If you don't have data and have meaningful data that you can use, this will never work because that's how we make our decisions. That's how we decide when a specific program's doing well or having challenges and what those challenges are, and then if our actual what we've implemented to fix the problem has actually worked. You got to have data, and I'll show you how we do it. I'll show you how you can partner with Intuitive to do it. You got to develop quarterly meetings that you meet with the executive team at least 4 times a year so that you can go over and make sure that all the strategies are aligned and how we're approaching them are everyone's rowing in the same direction, but also when there becomes problems that come up that we work together to solve them. We got to have wins for the program. Vertical integration I'll talk about is a huge, important sort of building block of developing alignment. Creating business plans on a yearly basis obviously is important for anything we do. And then lastly, leveraging intuitive resources. So how do you build trust? You know, it sounds like sort of like, you know, it's a little cliche. Well, culture eats strategy for lunch every day. Well, what does that mean? You know, how do you do it? And I'll tell you, again, I think it's some basic concepts. Number one, you build trust by articulating your goals. You make clear to both your staff, your surgeons, as well as your leadership team, what the goals are this year. What are we trying to achieve? And each hospital and each institution will have different goals, but unless you're meeting with the executive team and working together, there's no way to articulate the goals because you don't know what they are. But if you know what they are and you articulate them well, it gives everybody purpose and meaning and a direction to go to. Number two, you've got to get the data and you've got to share the data. You want to be transparent. The antidote to anxiety is clarity, is transparency. And so when people get anxious, it's because they don't know what's happening. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what the data is. And the way you get around that is you share that data with people. And we share our data openly with all of our surgeons on a regular basis, and it helps them improve. We create standard operating procedures, so it's very clear. I'll give you an example around using, when we talk about block time, we're very clear. You have a 75% utilization or you get put on probation. It happens again, another 3 months, you're below 75%, you will end up losing your block time. So these are standard operating procedures we use for block time. Everyone knows what they are. There are no surprises. They know that if they do not hit their 75%, they have to come up with a plan, and if they don't hit it after that, we then start releasing it to other people. But those are important things that allow you to get trust and alignment. When you're starting your program, look for easy wins. Don't look for, we want to be the #1 program for length of stay in the country. It may not happen right away, but you can look for some easy wins, which is maybe it's we want to improve our volume from 2 cases to 3 cases a day, or we want to improve our utilization from 60% to 80%, or maybe it's we want to increase our complexity of cases, or we want to bring in another a surgeon that does oncology. But identify some easy wins that you can achieve the first year. Then when you achieve them, celebrate them. Let everybody know. So think about it. It's so simple. You articulate the goals. Here's what we're going to do. You achieve those goals. Easy wins. You tell everyone what you did. And then all of a sudden, that's where the trust is built, because you have created an environment where everyone knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and when it gets done, everyone's celebrating and sharing the success of working together as a team. Let's talk about leveraging data, okay? And I'll tell you what's important to us here at Hackensack University Medical Center. May be different from your organization, but I would suspect there would be many similarities. So when you think about leveraging data, you have to think about it on who's looking at the data. What are the parties interested in? And you have to, again, understand that the data that's important to the executive team may not be the same interest to the clinical team. So from the executive team, they want to know that we have growth, right? They're looking for heads and beds. That is their #1 goal in most hospitals. How do we get more patients in the door? They want to make sure that they're having a positive contribution margin, that robotics is not hurting them, but it's adding to their contribution margin. They're going to look at payer mix. They want to see that by doing robotics, we are increasing our payer mix to more commercial insurances, driving up our revenue. They want to make sure we have excellent operational capacity. And basically what that means is decreased length of stay and decreased readmissions. The quicker we get our patients out, the quicker the throughput is. And they want to know that robotics is able to decrease the variation of supply cost, that we're able to do surgeries sort of the same way so we decrease any sort of variation and cost management. That's what's important to them. So when you talk to your executive team, these are the things you're going to focus on. When you're talking to your surgical team and your clinical team, there are different data sets that they're interested in. They're more interested in, how is robotics helping me from an outcomes perspective? How is it helping me decrease conversions to open surgery? How is it helping me decrease complications or patient safety incidences, readmissions? It may be, how is it decreasing, we use transfusion rate as a surrogate endpoint. These are the sort of the quality outcomes that we look at are conversions to open, complications, readmissions, length of stay, and transfusions. Length of stay is a huge clinical outcome for us, and it also lends itself very well to ERAS protocols. OR efficiency can be looked at in many different ways. Some look at it just console time. That's an easy number to get off of the intuitive teams. We look at it as in-to-out time because we look at it as a much bigger picture, which is all the things that go into the surgery from the moment the patient hits the room to the moment they leave. And then finally, we want to reduce variation, similar to cost management, but for different reasons, because it allows us to develop a much more choreographed operation, which decreases time and improves efficiency. All things that surgeons and their counterparts want to do. So our dashboard looks something like this. We're actually converting our dashboard. We used to use, up until this month, have used Oracle BI. So Oracle BI is a data repository which brings information in from our Epic system, as well as from Premier data, which is not case mix adjusted, to give us our data. We're moving to Vizient which is a little more robust, and we're able to match specifically to hospitals as well as the case mix index of the patient, the severity of the patient. But either way, I think one of the most important things one has to be able to do with their data is they have to be able to get it granular down to the procedure and the surgeon. In other words, it's very difficult for me to compare Dr. Stifelman to Dr. Ahmed, okay? Even though we're both urologists and we go through robotic surgery. But Dr. Stifelman may do a lot more simple surgeries. He may do a lot more prostate surgery. And Dr. Ahmed may do a lot more cystectomies and more complex procedures. And so if you just look at our data, you may say, oh, look, Dr. Stifelman's so much better than Dr. Ahmed. But it's just because we're not, comparing apples to apples. We're not, sorting, identifying the procedure. And so what I basically am trying to suggest from this is that when you use any sort of data set, you want to look at it by procedure. That way, it's much easier to compare the surgeons themselves. So this, for example, looks at robotic partial nephrectomy. And specifically, we want to look at length of stay for robotic partial nephrectomy. What's important to us are three things in length of surgery at Hackensack. Number one is our observed better than our expected. We want a less than a 1-to-1 ratio. That's good. Number two, what is our CMI adjusted length of stay? That is a measure that's is on our dashboard that helps me get a bonus at the end of the year, and I want that less than 2.5. And then finally, how are we doing compared to last year? So these are the sort of things we look at of length of stay. But again, when you're looking at length of stay, you really need to look at it by procedure, and then you can compare the surgeons and see who the outliers are. And to me, I would argue probably the most important aspect of length of stay is that your observed length of stay is less than expected. We also look at readmissions and transfusions. Those are very important, and mortality. So again, we can look at this as an entire service line to get a sort of 30,000-foot view, but I would argue, again, it's more useful when we look at it based on procedures, specific data. And again, we look at more mortality rate. We can break it down by month, by surgeon, by procedure. And again, we want our observed to be less than expected. We look at our 30-day readmission rate, and we look at our overall transfusion rate. We also look at clinical and economic value to the hospital. So here we look at, again, how many patients returned to the hospital within 30 days, either same-day surgery or the ER. That's a surrogate endpoint for a problem because we're not getting paid anything for those patients that are coming back within 30 days. We look at our payer mix. Is robotics driving our payer mix to more commercial patients? And yes, it is here at Hackensack. And then finally, the diagnosis codes as well to make sure we're getting the highest reimbursement. So if you're going to create a service line, which is going to drive your investment in robotics, you've got to have the data. And that data has got to be robust, and that data needs to be able to get drilled down, I would argue, by procedure so that you can look for the outliers and start making the adjustments required. Task force and vertical integration. Once you have the data, once you understand the data, your medical director now then can go and develop these task force and vertical integration. So a task force meeting is very simple. You meet up with the executive team, you have your clinical excellence, your surgeon champion, and you have your OR team, OR leadership team, and they are all in the same room. And you are all showing the data, you are showing the data, and you are all deciding as a group what is important. And the way this works is by developing this executive leadership team, this task force, as you can see on the top box here, you now can communicate to the program the goals of the leadership team, what we want to do over the next year, as well as capital acquisition, surgeon recruitment, so you have a real direction. That information is brought down to the operational oversight team so that they can make the adjustments within the OR schedule and the OR the inner workings to make sure that we can achieve what the leadership team is trying to do. And then it gets brought down to the folks who are doing it day by day. And so when you look at this, you say, "Oh, this is obvious, right? It's a top-down vertical alignment, so that everyone on top can push their orders down to the bottom." But I would challenge you again that what this does even more so and more effectively than taking the strategy and pushing it down to the day-to-day people is that it gives the guys and the women who are on the bottom of this graph, who are the day-to-day operations on the figure here, it gives them someone to talk to when there's a problem. So, for example, if they're finding that every day at 3 o'clock they are getting a team of surgeons that or a team that is not as good as the one in the morning, they now have someone to go to. If they are finding that we're having a problem with turnover time after the third case, they have someone can talk to. They have an operational oversight team who can take all these problems and address them one by one. And then if those problems can't be addressed by the operational oversight team and need some other input or some money from the executive leadership team, we already have a bridge. We already have communication with the leadership team. And so as important as this vertical integration allows information to be driven from a top to a bottom approach, it also allows changes to be made from a bottom-up approach. And again, if you're going to have a successful robotics program, I really would challenge you to consider this vertical integration, which is based a lot on data that you share both up and down. So here are some of the task force areas that we focused on the last 2 years. And I'm going to kind of go through each one of them not one by one, but just very, very quickly. So 24-hour access, that was a bottom. Okay, that was our surgeons saying we need 24-hour access. Decrease OR time, that came from the top. Improving setup time, that came from the top. Increasing complexity of cases, that came from the top. Procedure standardization, that came from the bottom. So things go up and things come down, but all of these get addressed with the task force meetings, and we're able to develop strategies to implement them. What I want to do now is focus a little bit on 24-hour access, because I would argue this is one of a very hot area in building a successful program, that it makes no sense not to have 24-hour access in 2020. And I'm going to go over a little bit how we do it and and a little bit about how Intuitive has helped us create a 24-hour access program. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Jim and have him take over from here.
Thank you, Dr. Stifelman. So with every good partnership, it takes time, and the parties have to involve. We've been working with Hackensack for a long time. You know, they were one of the first hospitals to implement the Vinci system, and we've learned a lot from each other over the years. There's a lot of trust there, and so when you have trust, you can challenge each other to be better. In the early years, our relationship with our customers was more transactional and surgeon-focused. You know, there was little process, and the value of robotics was still forming. Today, we have greater alignment. Our approach is more quality-focused. We are leveraging data, as Dr. Stifelman said, our data, your data, big data, to really measure, benchmark, and validate performance. You know, as we move to the future, we have a shared vision focused on change management, and data now is much more actionable. It's not just about looking at spreadsheets and charts. It's about bringing meaningful change to patient care. So by having a seat at the table, we can really work with organizations to better understand what's important to them and help them achieve their goals. So these are some of the goals that we've helped organizations really focus on, and many of them are are probably similar to what you all are working on. So you need data to support your efforts. The market access and custom analytics team, the team that I'm on, was really created to help with that transition from thinking about your program set, really knowing. We provide insights into your markets, understanding what opportunities you may have based on a benchmark or a standard, and then leveraging best demonstrated practice to help achieve change. So you've seen the quadruple aim. I mean, we are, from an expanded access perspective, as we're talking about today, we really can focus on addressing those constraints that may be holding you back from achieving the quadruple aim of better outcomes, lower costs, and improved experience. So the constraints that we focus on are belief, access, and coordination. Lack of clinical outcomes data can really result in care team misalignment. And we see organizations all the time where anesthesia is not aligned. And so it's important to have all the stakeholders at the table. Capacity challenges and the inability to add on cases can lead to higher open surgery rates. And inefficiency and high costs are a result of not training all of the clinical stakeholders to the same standard. What happens if you don't address these constraints? They can lead to costly variation. So by tracking, we can measure the variation and focus on driving efficiencies. Whether it's clinical, financial, or operational, we can uncover the root cause and help support you in terms of understanding where those challenges may be with people, process, or products, and then really help you implement solutions to reduce that variation and create a more standardized approach. So it's important to look at cost, total cost of care. Some metrics are easy to measure. We talked about supplies, capital costs, OR time. That's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's the downstream costs that Dr. Stiefman referred to around conversions, complications, surgical site infections. That represents a significantly larger contributor to that overall cost. And when you have that variation, through surgeon experience or patient comorbidities, that can also drive up cost. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I think that's why when we're talking about after-hours programs, and we're going to get into the data here, but when you're implementing this, it's so important to measure the impact. And Peter Drucker said it best: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So in terms of MACA and how we can help you, it's really through that data. And we've been building this really robust analytics engine, comparative data set with, over 50 or 5,000 deployed robotic systems. Over 7,000 surgical encounters are in this data set to really provide insights. And then we've integrated third-party data sets like Premier and Truven to provide that powerful benchmarking capabilities. And, we're working with many organizations across the country, Hackensack, for example, to really integrate their data into this engine and develop those insights that can be shared with the steering committees to really understand, the current state of their program and where there's opportunities. So in the end, these insights that we get from the data, we can create a prescription for success, and we'll deploy the necessary resources from our ecosystem to help you achieve your goals. And so if we're talking about expanded access and why expanded access, we know organizations often have challenges, right? Need to accommodate after hours, emergent cases, add-on cases. And, I think, as we see in the data, we're making strides, right? But there's still, a high number of surgeons performing open surgery. And that's even with, investment in lap towers, minimally invasive technology in them. And so this is really providing a great recipe for us to really focus on growing after-hours programs across our customers. So the evolution of MIS has come a long way. This chart is from Premier database, and it shows the adoption of modality across multiple procedures. And as you can see, in 2008, the majority of the patients needing one of these procedures received an open procedure. You fast forward to 2017, and the results of, an enabling technology with a connected training environment and increasing access to robotic surgery has really dramatically impacted the ability of patients to receive a minimally invasive approach. And so
So Jim, I'm going to stop you here for 1 second. Just jump in.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear. Prostate surgery and urology, I would argue that we are the early adopters of this, and we've gone through the adoption curve, and even the late adopters are on this. Looking at hysterectomy, they were the ones right behind us. And now you look at general surgery and thoracic, they're sort of just starting to, get into that adoption curve now. So I am very confident when we come back 5 years from here, it's all going to be blue, or a vast majority of blue, similar to what you're seeing in prostate surgery. So as a program, you got to start thinking about how am I going to provide the access required to make this change happen, because it's happening.
Thanks, Dr. Stifelman. So, in terms of, kind of setting the stage and looking at the numbers from a national perspective, in terms of programs providing after-hours care, and, we define after-hours as really, the current surgery schedule of 7 to 3, and then after hours would be after 3 or on the weekend. So as we look at the national landscape, there are many organizations offering, some sort of after hours or weekend access. Over 12% of organizations are treating patients after hours. When we in terms of expanded access, it's grown. So the blue is what we're considering expanded access in this graph. You can see the percentage continuing to increase since 2010. Now, not all organizations have formal structures in place, but there's robotic surgeons that want the opportunity to provide a robotic approach to their patients, whether during normal business hours, after hours, or weekends. As Dr. Stifelman mentioned around surgeon satisfaction, it is directly affected by their ability to access the technology any time of day without having to struggle with scheduling or add-on of their cases. And they want that same level of trained staff to provide that same level of care to the patient, not an A or B team. And after-hours procedures are occurring across all customer segments. So within the highest percentage is academic and teaching. Almost 15% of procedures are being done after hours. So what that means, residents are being trained on the technology and will likely look for organizations, where there's opportunities for unfettered access, agnostic of time of day or care team. 5 of the top 8 procedures performed after hours are in general surgery and colorectal, with the highest percentage, over 21%, of cholecystectomies being performed after hours. The advancements in our 4th-gen platform, specifically enhanced visualization, advanced instrumentation, multi-quadrant access, have really accelerated adoption, especially in those specialties, which, as Dr. Stifelman mentioned, previously had high open rates. So we're seeing that reduction with expanded access. Over 50%, again, are, surgeries are performed after hours are within general surgery and colorectal. But as Dr. Stifelman alluded to, this is not limited to those 2 specialties. When you have a program that embraces after-hours access, you can create an environment to really accommodate other procedures under this approach.
And so I'm going to jump in here for a second. So there's really 2 ways that I look at after-hours procedures. The first is allowing us to do cases past 3 o'clock. And many, many organizations, and maybe your organization that you're in right now, tells their surgeons, we can only do 2 robotic cases a day because we don't have the staff in the evening to support you. And therefore, you can't start a case after 3 o'clock because we may not have the staff to support you. That's just silly. And so what's happening is that surgeons are being handcuffed because you don't have the quote-unquote staff to support them. And so what at Hackensack, and you'll see this, our robotic prostate surgery and our robotic nephrectomy surgery didn't go up, and even the malignant hysterectomies here, they're not going up because we're necessarily doing them, emergently on the weekends or at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're going up because they've given us the staff so we can do 3 or 4 cases in a day and let us decide when we finish, not be told we're finishing because we don't have the staff. The second way of looking at after hours is the emergent cases. And that's where it comes into a huge quality difference as well. So again, we had surgeons who could, on a Friday at 8 o'clock at night, do a robotic case because they had after hours or they had people doing surgery into the evening. But on the weekend, they couldn't do that same operation, even if it was at 11 o'clock in the morning. So they're coming to us saying, wait a second, I have a patient that comes in with a strangulated hernia at 11 o'clock on Friday morning, and I get a robot. But I have another patient at 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon who has the same exact problem, and there's no one to help me with the robotic case, so I can't do it. That is not good medicine. That's bad. So by allowing your program to develop a 24/7 access, where if you have a robot available and a surgeon wants it, they're getting it, by developing that culture, you're going to allow your volume to expand during the week because you're not going to be limited to this crazy only 2 cases a day concept, and you're going to create, which is going to create significant satisfaction, and you're going to create satisfaction for the surgeons also, because now it doesn't matter when what time of day it is, if they need a system and it's available, they're getting it. Continue.
Thank you, and that's a nice segue into expanding access and what that means from the impact in terms of total cost of ownership. Nationally, organizations are performing on average around 330 procedures on the XI system with an average fixed cost of around $1,300. But when we look at organizations that are really performing procedures after hours and expanding that access, the average fixed cost drops significantly. So why should time of day really dictate access to the surgeon's preferred approach? I mean, it goes back to our whole access, belief, and coordination. And, again, this is a tool that we've worked with our customers on that we can share, but, it's really asking those right questions and understanding what potential barriers you might face, problems that you might have to address to implementing this. So, do you have the needed technology? Are you working under a dedicated room structure? Do you have the right trained staff to support these cases? From belief, are all your stakeholders aligned and bought into the strategy? Have you quantified the value? And, we talked about coordination and throughput and managing your block schedule. This is an example. We help organizations visualize their schedule across all of their systems. And so, this is Hackensack, but what we're trying to do is really ensure that, customers are really maximizing the time across the workday and identifying where there's opportunities to streamline process. So in terms of Hackensack, I think Dr. Seifelin can speak to it more specifically, but we can see they're performing procedures. All of these colors are individual surgeons performing procedures, and you see this stacking of procedures. It's highly efficient. They're minimizing turnover time. And when you do that, you're affecting the entire OR schedule and how everything is working within the OR department. You build a process and you develop a culture, and it allows physicians to really succeed without any constraints.
I mean, think about this, guys. Imagine if we stopped our cases at 3 o'clock. That's where the box is. That's where the box starts, okay? How much more white space we would have had here. that we wouldn't have filled. And again, look at basically about 26% of all of our cases are performed after hours. And so we get this we get this picture every month. We look at it. We bring it together over a 3-month quarterly period to help us look at utilization, as we discussed. And the term we use here is white space. We're looking for the white space. Where can we fill more cases? Where is there consistent white space? And that's how we do it.
I think some of the concerns from executive leadership and others is really around removing those barriers and understanding what the impact is. You always hear the myth around it takes too long, costs too much, and there's no difference in outcomes. And so, this is an example, again, focusing on those procedures where we're seeing growth in after hours, where, for cholecystectomy, this example, the OR times are consistent with laparoscopic approach. We're seeing a lower length of stay robotically, the blue versus lap. And there's a higher net revenue that is associated with the increase in commercial payer. When we look at outpatient inguinal hernia, again, another one of those procedures where you're seeing growth after hours, when compared to open, OR times and length of stay were equivalent, and they were able to generate a higher margin and a more favorable reimbursement for MIS. And I know we've been speaking, with a lot of customers, but if you're not aware, if you're limiting access to the robot, you're missing out on this enhanced reimbursement that we're seeing from Medicare and commercial payers. Payers are recognizing the value of providing the right approach in the right care setting. And, by offering unfettered access and allowing your surgeons to access the robot after hours, you're actually providing better quality of care to your patients, reducing open surgery, and your quality of earnings is improving. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Stifelman regarding, Hackensack's specific journey to expanded access.
We are running out of time, so I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quickly so we can get some question and answer periods. It's not very different to what Jim was saying. So again, if you look at our data, this after 3 p.m., we started off about a little less than about 15% back in 2015. We're up to about 25% of our cases are done after hours. And again, I think a lot of it was done because initially we just didn't have enough robots, enough access, so we just made a decision to increase the vertical structure or the vertical access. And then as we also, once we got more robots, we also increased that access to do it on the weekends. We also standardized our fleets, which made it super easy to do because now everyone's trained on the same system, has the same tools, and that's been very, very successful for us. And I think that's been a huge benefit by standardization to Gen 4, allowing us to improve our ability to roll this out. And again, the Gen 4 technology drove our recruitment, expanded surgeon training. We've developed the yes culture, as we talked about, where everything is, going to be, we're going to do it, no problem, doesn't matter what time it is. We've also moved one of our systems to our ambulatory, so we got more complex cases in. And again, as I mentioned, close to 25% of all cases are now performed after hours, which is twice that of the national average. Here are those same cases. I'm not going to go through this. Really important, though, and we heard a little bit, and we had to make sure for surgeon satisfaction that our outcomes are going to be as good when we do it after hours than we do it in hours. And so we looked at this. Consult times were identical. Doesn't matter when you did it. INA costs were identical. Doesn't matter when you do it. So how did we get it done? We had a belief that it had to get done. We had a need for access, and then we had coordination. Just going to move to this slide. It was very simple. We wanted to do it. We went to the Operational Oversight Committee. The Operational Oversight Committee says, listen, the only way to do this is we got to bring people in on a weekend. We got to train them, and we got to give them a reason to come. So we're going to pay them time and a half, and we're going to give them clinical education credits for it. We couldn't authorize that. We had to sell that to leadership. We went to leadership. They said, let's do it. Gave them the business plan. It made sense. It was vetted, and that's what we do. Currently, we have every quarter a class that's dedicated and run by the intuitive folks along with our nurses that goes the entire setup, goes over the during the case, goes over after the case, all the different care they need. So everyone has very strong familiarity with this, and they're certified. And it got us to the point where we could give 24-hour access, which again goes hand in hand with the quadruple aim of better outcomes, lower cost, improved care, and improved patient experience. So I went over the how, basically training them, believing in them, creating the culture, and measuring the outcomes. And what do you do when you get there? You celebrate it. And this year we did 500 cases per year at 2 cases per day during peak hours. Then we did 750 cases per year at 2 cases per day per peak hours. And that's just 1 case after hours. And then if you're able to do 2 cases after hours, you get up to 1,000 cases. So by just not buying more robots, not buying more team members, not hiring more surgeons, we're able to double your volume by just expanding to after hours, which just takes a little bit of effort of teaching and buy-in from your team. So key takeaways, establish your robotics service line, build trust and alignment, remove the barriers, and those same barriers are opportunities for improvement that will bring alignment and trust to your team. Collaborate to drive alignment, what's most important, and focus that on the quadruple aim. And with that, I want to say thank you from our team here at Hackensack, and we have a few minutes for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Stifelman and Jim, for that fantastic presentation. We will now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into the Q&A box on your dashboard, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we have time for. The first one I'd like to start with is someone wants to know, are the staff unionized? They feel like this would be the biggest barrier to weekend utilization.
In our hospital, no, we are not unionized. But in many of our other hospitals within our system, they are, and we have not seen that to be an issue.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for answering that. And another audience member is asking, are there any cases that you initially granted 24-hour access to, or was it all procedures?
All procedures for us. And there were certain surgeons or cases where we were sort of pushing them to do after hours. For example, thoracic. Thoracic currently just does 2 cases a day in our OR. And we're like, we really want you to do 3 cases a day. You can start, and looking at their volume, they could start the case at 4 o'clock and be probably done by 7:38. And their attitude was, we don't feel comfortable not having all, the entire heart team in there and all these other people that they need available if something goes bad to do after-hour cases. So we said, fine, this is your clinical decision based on your experience. You don't want to do it after hours, that's fine. So you finish at 3, and then at 3 o'clock we start adding in other surgeons. So their block time doesn't go to 6 o'clock. Their block times goes from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., or maybe it's 4 p.m. And after 4 p.m., then we open up to other people. So we're still getting after-hour cases in that room, but those cases are not specifically thoracic based on their decision.
Got it. Thank you for answering that and clearing that up. We have another audience member asking, is this dashboard accessible to outside sources?
So no, it's not. This dashboard is something that's proprietary to Hackensack, but there are many, many ways one can build your dashboard. The easiest way is just to partner with Intuitive. Intuitive has the ability today to give you surgeons' OR time, instrument usage, accessory usage, and length of, and I think not length of stay, but those are certainly 3 or 4 endpoints or data points they can give you. And then really what your next step is just to work with your Epic team or your IT or intelligence team and informatics team to help build you these dashboards. I am very confident that any institution in 2020 is going to be able to help you do this.
Great, that's super helpful. Thank you. Another audience member is asking, how do we convince surgeons to extend their block beyond 5 p.m. in a non-teaching, large community-based hospital?
So the way we do it is it's forced upon them a little bit. So they don't have to finish before. Yeah, they don't have to work much past 5 unless they want to. But the way we do it is every surgeon, we have their 10-hour blocks is how we do it. And so that they have to commit to filling their 10-hour blocks with a 75 to 80% utilization. And if they don't fill that time, then they don't use it, or they lose it. So they can't just do one case and walk out the door at 11:30 and hit the golf course. They have to use their time from 7 to 5 p.m. So that's one way that we've encouraged them, and so that what we've done also we've done this with many surgeons who have. I came here. I had one surgeon. He had 8 block days of OR for the robot every single month. 8 block days. He did 12 cases. I shut that down. I was like, no. The way this is going to work is you're going to now have 4 block days a month, and you're going to do 3 cases. And now we're going to release those other 4 block days to someone else. So, I think you just have to set some very clear rules and regulations and expectations that people follow. And then the other surgeons who are looking, who don't have as much access to the robot or who don't have block time or as much block time, you can then offer them up that after-hour spot.
Thank you. That was a really helpful answer. We also have a question coming in. How do you pair robotic and surgical data with patient-reported outcome data?
So again, in our dashboard, we're able to break it down by procedure and the type of procedure performed. So we can compare robotic cholecystectomy to open cholecystectomy to lap cholecystectomy, and then our dashboard is able to give us quality data on each of those different types of procedures. So that's what I sort of suggested earlier, that when you build these dashboards, you've got to make them procedure-based, CPT code-based, so that you're able to, do a real, head-to-head analysis of those quality metrics.
Okay, great. Good to know. And do you allow flip rooms for robots?
Only after hours, honestly. So during the day, we don't use flip rooms. Each surgeon stays in their own room. And then what we do is, as the day goes to, past 5 p.m., if there's a room that finished early because they're efficient, or maybe a case canceled, or whatever that may be, we start flipping rooms. So now only as said ad hoc, not as a only as an ad hoc, not as a permanent thing, like a schedule flipping of the room.
Okay, gotcha. And does Intuitive have access to data from the robots, or does it stay with the hospital?
Jim, why don't you take that one?
Yeah. So the MAGA team and your representatives do have access to your robotic system data. A lot of the reports and information that we shared with you was actually pulling that information off of your system. That's there's a computer interface that's running nonstop, collecting data daily, hourly, and so we have access and can really help you visualize your performance, your efficiencies by surgeon. By day of week, by time. So it's a tool that we can use and help you really understand how your program is performing.
Thank you for taking that question. That was really helpful. We also have an audience member who wants to know, how do you manage staff fatigue for after hours?
So, most of the staff are evening staff. So it's not as if we've asked our, very rarely, though it does happen with me sometimes because my staff is super nice to me, but very rarely do we have someone coming at 7 and then staying until 12 at midnight and doing overtime. Most of the time, what we do is we have an evening staff that's trained up equally as well. And because we do so much after-hour surgery, they maintain their core competence. So we don't do it by making people take overtime to run the rooms. We do it by training the evening staff to run the rooms.
That makes sense. Thank you. And do you have a dedicated robotic OR, or do the ORs function as hybrid robotic lap open ORs?
Great question. So we have, of our 5 systems, 2 of the rooms are dedicated OR rooms. We are very, very, very short for space. And we've had a very difficult time creating the third room to be a dedicated OR room. Though most of our cases are done most of that third system in the main OR is done in that very specific room. And then for the SP, we do have we've carved out 3 days a week in the urology suite where we do SP cases there because it's mostly used by urology. So the answer is we try whenever possible to use two of the robots stay in one room only. The third robot we bought recently stays in one room mostly, but we have also come into challenges where that room was required for other surgeons and blah, 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 and that we couldn't switch the rooms around as easily. So we ended up allowing that robot to move, and then the one in the ambulatory care center stays in its own room. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is, if possible, I actually absolutely would recommend every robot have its own room. But
Great,
you need to be flexible.
That's really helpful. Yeah, absolutely. And what is your goal for turnover between robotic cases?
It's 30 minutes, out to in.
Great. Do you have any issues with surgeons wanting the XI robot over the X?
No, absolutely not. So we initially had an S, I, and then we converted that to an X. So we did have some issues. So we initially put our SI into the ambulatory unit, and we got a lot of pushback saying, oh, it wasn't as good quality and this and that and blah, blah, blah. So we ended up switching out for an X. But, we spoke to the surgeons beforehand. We said, listen, here's what we're looking to do, and we want your input. The X is really very, very good for sort of the straightforward outpatient surgery we're doing, such as hernia repair, cholecystectomy, hysterectomy, endometriosis. It's not multi-quadrant, complex stuff. So the X is working very well for that, and we've got no pushback.
Great. Dr. Stifelman, Jim, I think we're about at the end of our time. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Jim, you want to start?
Yeah, no, I just think, in terms of, opportunities for growth and, really looking at your program, understanding, where you are from a utilization perspective. We get questions all the time on, capacity and where they are. And, I think it's important to be aware, during your normal business hours, how busy you are, what surgeons, what they're talking about in terms of access, needing access to the system. And, just being aware that, you have this whole, additional time after 3 that the robot could be utilized more. And, building in that program, the policies around being able to add on cases, addressing, you know, some of the emergent needs within your community, really focusing and understanding, you know, your organization today operationally and how that would potentially translate to expanding access into after hours and weekend availability.
I like it. And what I guess what I would add is build the service line, guys. Find the surgeon champion. Get data that you could share with everybody and articulate your goals. And if you do those things, you're going to see incredible growth and satisfaction in your program.
Thank you both for those final thoughts. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you again, Dr. Michael Stifelman and Jim Ossenmacher, for your excellent presentation, and thanks to Intuitive for sponsoring today's webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you.